Today is the third talk in our series called Thriving as an Empath. And you don't have to have watched the previous ones to jump in today. They're all standalone, but there are more if you want to listen to the other ones. The topic of today is all about being able to discern whether the feelings I feel inside are mine or whether there's someone else's. And this is really, really important because we often feel things, and the hard things when we feel things, if it's not ours, we'll start to analyze it. If we don't know that it's not ours, we'll start to analyze it, and we'll start to try to connect dots in our head and our stories to try to make the emotion feel reasonable, right? So let's say I'm just walking along or I'm chatting with people and all of a sudden I feel really sad. If I think that's mine, but maybe it's not, maybe it's someone's over there, but if I think it's mine, I'm going to start to wonder, well, what am I sad about? Well, I wonder if it's that thing that my partner said earlier, or I wonder if it's this situation going on, in that city over there. Or I wonder if it's because of that person's situation. I'll bet it's that, and I should do something about that. And suddenly we're connecting dots in our head that don't belong, that don't need to be connected because the emotion was never ours to begin with. And so then what can happen is we can start to feel a little crazy because it's almost like we're constantly navel gazing. We're constantly going, is it me? Like, what am I afraid of now? What's going on? How come I feel so uncomfortable? Why do I have all this anxiety? You know what? Forget it. I'm just going to go and I'm going to hide in my house and I'm not going to go outside because, as much as we say, I think those people out there are crazy, it's us that we think is crazy. It's us that we think, I can't handle it out there. But none of it's ours? Right? Some of it might be, but not all of it. And this gets really, really confusing fast, right? So, and also the other big thing is because emotions are something that, because in the last millennia or so, the energy on the planet has been all about oppressing the feminine. And I don't mean just women, I mean the feminine. I mean emotion, I mean deep wisdom, I mean truth, I mean ignoring the body, ignoring the land, I mean oppressing the feminine, right? Totally living in this state of separation. And so we've learned to bury these emotions. So then all of a sudden, if you're walking around and you're feeling happy, then you're feeling sad, then you're feeling frightened, then you're feeling anxious, you're just like, this is not acceptable. This is not an acceptable way to be. I'm supposed to be stoic. I'm supposed to have it all together. I'm not supposed to be driven by my emotions, right? This isn't right. And we feel like there's something wrong with us. And there's always, we even see it in movies and stuff, right? Well, that's the overly emotional, crazy person, or there's that person that can't control themselves and they're just so childish and, all this kind of thing. Like we really have these avatars almost of the overly emotional person, and that it's a character flaw and all this nonsense, right? And it's really easy to internalize that, right? It's really easy to believe that's us. So this ability, this simple ability to be able to discern, is this my feeling or is it someone else's, is foundational to really thriving as an empath. So first, let's imagine the context here. Like, what are we talking about? Here we are. We talk about how we are all one. So in many ways, all of us here are part of a singular consciousness. This is this singularity, God, space, oneness, this general consciousness, say, that Edgar Cayce tapped into, right? And that we all can tap into. That was one of the great things about The Matrix, the movie The Matrix. They talk about that, right? They play it out in a sci-fi way that I need to be able to fly this helicopter, tank, download the data kind of idea, right? But really, they're showing us that that's all we have to do to tap into that general consciousness. I need to be able to do this. Done. I can do it. Right? I personally believe it's 100% true. I believe that whatever we ask for, if we need it, it's important that it has to actually be real. It can't just be, I want $1 million. Oh, ta-da, I got $1 million. That stuff, that's nonsense. That's silly. But when we actually need something and we ask for it, it is downloaded 100%. And so here we are. We are all part of this general consciousness. And what connects us? Right? Once we split into duality, right? We're oneness, and then we all split into duality, and now we're all these individual beings, right? We are all different right here. We all have a different DNA sequence. We all have a different mission, a different set of gifts, challenges, joys, hopes, beliefs, everything. Everybody here is perfectly unique and separate. Although once in some dimension we are one, in this dimension that we are having a conversation in right now, we're separate because it's fun. It's fun to be separate. It's fun to get to experience each other, right? It's fun to chat and joke and learn things and make love and eat chocolate and feel the sunshine. It's fun to be in duality, right? But we are both. And it's interesting to kind of hold both of those realities in our minds. So now here we are, we're all wandering around. But there's a part of us that's still connected, right? We can still feel each other. We can still, where our hearts are still connected. Probably even our second chakras are still connected, right? That we actually, it's natural to be empathic, that we feel each other's emotions. It's natural to be telepathic, that we can intuit each other's thoughts. I remember reading the book Mutant Message Down Under by Marlo Morgan. I think that's her name. And it was such an interesting book, and long story short, she was a New York journalist, and she went down to Australia to do a story on the Aboriginals. And unbeknownst to her, they, kind of put her through something and said, okay, just come follow us. And then they took her on a 6-month walkabout in the outback. And one of the things that was really interesting is they'd all be walking along, and all of a sudden everyone would turn and they would walk this way. And then they would turn and they would walk this way. And she said to her guide, she said, I don't understand, like, how can you do this? And he said, humans are meant to be telepathic. The only reason and he called her a mutant, right? That most of us are actually living as mutants of humans. We're not living our full human capacity. And he said, because your society is based in judgment. And because you believe in judgment, you believe that there's right and wrong, you believe that this is an okay feeling and that's not an okay feeling, and this is an okay thought and that's not an okay thought, you all guard yourself from your telepathy. I can't read your thoughts because I have too much judgment in my mind. My foundation is judgment. So I'm going to read your thoughts and I'm going to think, well, that's not a good thought, and you shouldn't be thinking that. And, oh my gosh, you think that about me? Oh, look at me. Like, whatever. Good, bad. It doesn't matter whether it's a good or bad thought. The fact is that we're judging it at all. Right? And of course, it's a double guard, because I'm going to guard you from reading my thoughts, because I'm afraid of your judgment too. Right? So instead of just simply allowing thoughts to be thoughts, and just reading the field for whatever thoughts are out there, we have to guard ourselves from each other, because our whole society is based in judgment, right? But imagine telepathy is natural, right? That may just be how, how we are struggling to integrate this frontal cortex in a healthy way that actually lets us thrive, right? Like when you think about this frontal cortex, and I'm talking about that because in many parts of the brain, for example, like in the back of the brain here, this is the part that they believe governs movement, right? This part of the brain they believe governs sound and voice and that kind of thing. And I say they believe because we really don't have any idea what's going on in the brain. All we can do is map where there's activity when certain things are happening, or if there's been an accident, if, especially motorcycle accidents, if part of the brain is damaged, what a person can no longer do. It doesn't mean we understand what's going on, right? We've observed a lot. So, and even neuroscientists will say that. I'm not being a jerk here. But what's interesting is this part of the brain, this frontal cortex, is not actually developed until we're about 8, 9, 10 years old, when we actually start to be able to have abstract thought, right? As opposed to kind of this instinctual abilities in the other parts of the brain. And so what we've done in this frontal cortex is we've gotten all these ideas in our head, like these ideas of judgment, or these ideas that emotions are bad, or that sadness is bad, or that anger is bad, or that happiness is good. And, we have these ideas, but they're all being stored up here in the frontal cortex, but they're not integrated properly. They're not integrated into reality. They're not integrated into understanding life in a way that is helpful or real. Like a lot of this frontal cortex is used for fantasy. So this is one of the huge challenges of being empathic, and to understand that all humans are empathic, but we all develop different gifts in different ways. I was thinking this morning, I don't know why I was thinking about this morning. I was thinking about, how in the spiritual community we'll say things like, this is very condescending, but we'll say things like, oh, well, that person's not as far along on their journey. That person's not as enlightened as this person. Like, we say these things. It's so funny, right? And there's a weird assumption that everybody's on the same journey, right? Like we look out at all these people and we think that all these people are on the same journey, but I'm about 5 miles ahead of you, and that person's 5 miles ahead of me, or whatever. And it's like, we're not on the same journey. Like, there's no comparison. That person's not less evolved or less enlightened than you are. They're on a completely different mountain. I don't know why. I was thinking about that this morning. How funny that is, how we just create. Again, this is all this frontal cortex just making stuff up. Like literally creating maps that we have to live according to, but that aren't true. So this is one of the challenges with being empathic in this world, with this frontal cortex that is not properly developed yet, or not properly, I imagine it like a motherboard that has to be put into a computer and connected, but it's not quite connected properly, or maybe all of it's not connected, or maybe even some of them are cross-wired or something. Because if you imagine a herd of animals, or this tribe of aboriginals, and they're walking through the world, and all of a sudden someone sees something, right? There's danger, they look. Everybody will tune into it. What? And then everybody can make a change. They can run, they can do whatever, they can hide, because one person saw it, they all see it. This is really valuable, right? This does not hurt the empath's heart, because you're feeling something very real. If you're sitting with a friend and, someone they love has died, or something bad has happened and your friend is hurting, this doesn't hurt us as an empath. This is a natural feeling, and we're just simply there for our friend. We don't run from that kind of thing. But the world and these curious frontal cortexes I don't know how to say plural cortex. This isn't properly adapted. So then what happens is most of the emotions that we are throwing out at the world aren't real. They're actually created by our minds. They're created by unresolved issues in this frontal cortex, or unresolved issues even from past experience. So, for example, you imagine, so you're an empath, right? Super sensitive. And you see a child walking along the other side of the street and they're eating an ice cream cone. And the ice cream cone all of a sudden drops and the child cries, right? This isn't upsetting. The child is genuinely upset because they dropped their ice cream. Now imagine, take some 25-year-old person and they're walking along and they're eating their ice cream and all of a sudden they trip and their ice cream falls. Well, initially they're like, oh, okay, as an empath, we're still okay. The problem is this frontal cortex gets a hold of this and goes to town. And suddenly it's like, oh, you're so clumsy. What's wrong with you? Why are you always so clumsy? Why are you always such a loser? What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. You know what? This is my mom's fault. It's because she always said this thing and she just cut my feet out from under me all the time. And you know what else? My last husband, that's what they were like too. And they blah, 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 blah. Now you imagine the emotional cloud that's coming off of this person. It has nothing to do with reality. They have literally jumped into 7 different timelines that have nothing to do with this reality right here. And they are emoting like, Mount Vesuvius out into the world. And the hard thing about these kinds of emotions, these kind of false emotions, these emotions that are created by the mind, because the mind can take us into any alternate timeline it wants, right? If you want to feel something again, if you want to go to something that's difficult, whether you want to or don't want to, your mind, it's like it has this little filing cabinet, and it can just go in and go, let's dive into this experience that is still unresolved or I'm struggling with, and bam, your whole body's feeling it, right? It's just, you're full out there. This is like endemic in the world. This is so common in the world that I don't know what the percentage is, but I would say that it's a very high percentage of the emotions we feel in a day have nothing to do with the current reality. We're thinking about the past. We're reliving something that is from another time. We are projecting into the future. We're worrying. We're stressing out. We're doing all kinds of things. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it's really important to go into those dark corners to heal. Right? But again, even that's okay, right? A lot of people who do healing work are empaths. And when you're working with someone and you get into those dark corners, that's not throwing you because they're genuinely feeling something. The stories that are wrapped up around it and stuff that are creating all these other kind of rabbit holes of emotions that aren't real, that's exhausting. That's crazy, right? So this is another really, 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 really important reason to be able to discern between, is this my emotion and is this someone else's? Because if it's not yours and it's someone else's, there's a high probability it's not even real. And you are responding to, people could be... When I was a teenager, we watched like Young and the Restless, like soap operas and General Hospital and things like that. You could sit around pissed off because Victor said something to Victoria or whatever their names were, and really be pissed about it and really be all jacked up about a TV show. And in many ways, a lot of us are walking around all upset about things that are as real as a soap opera, right? So this is really, really important, because as an empath, we don't want to have to hide in our homes. And I'm not judging whether or not we're caught up in things in the world. That's just life. This is our journey. It's all good, right? We all do it. We all do it. It's part of what we're doing here. But as an empath, we need to be able to discern. And again, to just simply accept it, to understand it. Okay, I'm part of a herd. Most of the herd, maybe all of the herd, hasn't quite figured out how to integrate this thing in their brain that can create fantasy. It can also, in the positive, it's imagination. It's where we dream and build amazing things. Like, I think the frontal cortex is genius. It's what allows us to actually project into a different timeline and say, here's what I want to do next week. That's why children under the age of 8 can't really do that. They can only live in this moment. The frontal cortex has amazing, amazing things that are possible. But we use it for all the wrong reasons, like this. So now, if you imagine a proper context for being an empath, we are part of a great consciousness. We are emotionally and mentally connected to everyone within it. Some people are really suffering and going through things. Other people might not be. And I need to be really clear as to how to use this empathic ability within this tribe, within this consciousness. So the number one question we ask as soon as we're feeling a certain emotion is we have to ask ourselves, is it mine? And it's that simple. Maybe you're walking along and all of a sudden you're like, whoa. Or thoughts start coming into your head and you're like, is this mine? And this is what's interesting when we play with intuition, that we have to, yes, no answers are really helpful. Because if it's yes, your heart kind of lifts or you feel kind of light. And if it's no, it's no. Right? And every one of us has to discern that. How do I hear a yes? How do I hear a no? It's kind of like when people use pendulums, right? And you have to first ask the pendulum, what's a yes? It's a circle. What's a no? It's a line. You have to ask. You have to make sure. We have to figure that out inside of us. What's a yes? What's a no? Really, really important, because every one of us might feel differently. You might feel a no is a certain tensing in some part of your body, or maybe your lower back hurts or something like that. And a yes is like a deep breath or something. But every one of us has to figure that out. And the only way we can figure it out is by playing with it, is by doing it and testing it. That's all. I can't explain it to you. No one else can do it. It's only through experience that we learn this. And one of the big reasons that this is so hard is that as children, we often naturally empathize with our parents and our siblings and whoever we were raised with. And it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just like, if you were born into that Aboriginal tribe, it would be completely natural that you would develop the empathy and the telepathy to communicate with the tribe en masse. It's very healthy. But again, we don't live in a tribe that is well connected in our minds and emotions and spirit, right? So now we live in a family, and maybe it's a great family. Maybe it's a happy family, total Leave It to Beaver family. And so your desire as a child is to make your parents happy. So you're always reading the emotional temperature of the room. What can you do to make it happy? What can you do to make your parents happy? What can you do to make them proud? What can you do to be seen? Very important to be seen. How do we keep the peace? Maybe the family really prides themselves on being very happy and joyful. Well, how do I keep doing it no matter what, right? Or maybe we live in a family where there's alcohol abuse or drug abuse. Maybe there's violence. Now we're actually tuning in to the whole to stay safe. To know, I mean, you kind of walk in the door and you almost, like, you just feel your whole heart just sink and you're like, oh. And then you go, maybe I'll go out for another hour, and you close the door and you don't even walk into the house, right? We develop this ability to feel what's going on in the family. And this is natural. It's a very natural thing. The challenge, again, is this frontal cortex. And this challenge that so many emotions don't actually reflect, or so many people's actions don't reflect their actual emotions. So let's say, for example, one of your parents was actually hurting, but they drank a lot. And because of the drinking, they would be violent or they would be mean. So now as an empath, you've got this anger coming and this violence coming towards you, whether it's emotional, mental, or physical, or sexual, or whatever. But what you feel as the empath, as the child, because as children, we're still kind of part of the herd. We're not disconnected yet. What we feel is pain or sadness. Well, this is wiring inside of us, that if I feel sadness or pain in someone, there could be an emotional outburst and I could get hurt. So it's really important to be able to understand the journey we've taken so far as a soul. And if that's the home we were raised in, and we don't have to wish we had it differently or anything like that, we just have to be aware that I have been wired to believe that if someone's sad, they might snap and do something to me. Or someone might be drinking and I can't trust what they're going to say or do. Like, this is just important information to know. And then we can unpack it. And then, especially as an adult, say, okay, that's not true, actually. Sadness doesn't mean violence. It doesn't mean they're going to lash out. But we have learned that sometimes it does. And that's really valuable, right? That can really keep us safe. And that's very helpful, especially when let's say even you're in a relationship and they are lashing out. But let's say you still want to resolve it. If you know this, you've seen this pattern before. You've watched people lash out, and you know that there's something else underneath it. You know that there's sadness. You know that there's pain. You know that there's hurt. And you can sit there in your wisdom and experience them lashing out and say, that's not necessarily what I'm feeling. And I'm not saying you should go around and read people and all. I'm talking about an intimate experience where you're trying to sort something out with someone you love. And you can say, like, are you sure this is how you feel? Because my heart's breaking right now. All I just feel is this so much sadness. And if we can find the right words, it can change the conversation and you can really talk about what's real. So a lot of times the things we've experienced in our past, even if they're really hard, are really powerful maps to unpattern things that happen later in our lives, because a lot of people have experienced real trauma in the childhood home. So it's interesting to have that witness mind to be able to really see that pattern. So now, let's say you're in a situation and you ask the question, is it mine? And it's a yes/no answer. If it's yes, okay, then you can go and connect the dots and sort it out and try to understand it, talk to a friend, journal, talk to a counselor, do something, go for a run, beat pillows, do whatever you got to do. If the answer is no, the next question is, whose is it? And if you're like out in a busy street, you'll be surprised how your head will suddenly turn. And maybe it's that person's. Or maybe a face that will kind of flash into your head, or an awareness of someone in your life. will kind of flash into your head. Okay, so maybe it's that person that you know. The next question is there something I meant to do about it? Is there some way I meant to help? And again, we have to, if you ask it as a yes-no answer, a yes-no question, if the answer is no, then the answer is no. For whatever reason, you landed on the same frequency as them, you felt it, and you can release it. If the answer is yes, then maybe you call them. You say, hey, how's it going? Because empathy is also a way of communicating with each other. It is a way of calling out, you know. It's a brilliant gift as a human. For example, as a parent, to be able to be empathic with our children when they can't explain themselves, they can't say, even maybe they're a baby, or maybe they're a toddler, or maybe they're a teenager who's struggling. But to be able to have that heart connection and really feel them, it's a way of them communicating with us, you know, and we can kind of know something's not right. Something's not right. We need to dig deeper. We need to look into this. Something's going on, right? This is really, really valuable. And it could be anyone. It could be a friend. It could be someone who is, it's sort of like if I was to say that someone's nonverbal, I don't mean that they're, you know, catatonic or they're unable to speak. But sometimes life's so overwhelming that you don't even know where to start. You know, and you might be sitting with a friend or a partner or someone and you're just like, and they're like, well, what's going on? And you're like, I just don't, you know, you've kind of maybe analyzed it to death. Maybe you're exhausted and you're just like, I don't even know where to start. And as a friend, if they've given you kind of this kind of permission to connect in this way, and you sort of close your eyes and you're like, I don't know, my heart's kind of just filled with pain right now. Is that what's going on? And then the other person can talk. Like, you know, there's a real beauty in being able to share empathic communication with each other, because life can get really overwhelming. And even we can have these it's like when we're young, if life is hard for many reasons, it could just simply be exclusion in high school. It could be difficult siblings. It could be difficult parents. It could be all kinds of things. It's like we create a secondary persona that can be very aloof, or it can be protective, or it can have a different persona altogether, and it protects our gentle self here. And a lot of times we live in this other persona for most of our life, right? And so all of a sudden, if someone's upset, it could be that their persona is what's chewing, right? That their pride is being hurt, or this and that, or they're angry and they're like, la, 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 la. But as an empath, we're feeling the true self, right? We feel the actual soul, not the persona. We feel the soul, which is one of the great gifts of being a friend or being, you know, a loving part of family, that you can really sit with someone you love and feel the real person and get underneath the persona and really get to the soul. Yeah, being an empath is incredibly, incredibly important. And so even if you imagine yourself as part of this tribe, right? And you sense danger, it's still important to honor that, right? If suddenly you sense danger, you can run, but be aware. Is it real danger? Is this something I learned as a child? And you don't bury it. Just because it might be something you learned as a child, just because it might be a knee-jerk reaction, doesn't mean you don't honor it. Because that's the dance, right? We're never going to figure it out by avoiding it. We're never going to figure it out by judging ourselves. We have to honor those instincts. We have to honor those emotional responses. That's how we sort it out. All we have to do, we just have to make sure that we know that we are sorting this out. Because it's really, really important. I'm the youngest and really dismissed by family in most cases. How can I break through to really help or connect with family? I feel them, but they are so difficult. My sense is the best thing is to always ask, is there something I'm meant to do right now? Right? Because there's a lot of families that are really crazy. There's a lot of dysfunction, right? And it's just reality. It's just really, really dysfunctional. And it might not be ours to fix. They may have to go down 100 more roads that you don't ever want to go down. So whenever things are amok, you always ask within, is there something I'm meant to do right now? And if the answer is yes, then ask what you're supposed to do. and wait for the words to come. And allow them to be different than what you might normally say. And if the answer is no, then we just take a step back and we allow, the play to continue, So if I have a predisposition to connect this deeply with my business partner, is this something we need to help them with in order to actually help myself too? That's what I feel. But he sometimes says, you just feel so much. It's as if it's all story. And I know that isn't accurate. I may not understand your question totally, but it is an interesting thing when we work in the healing world. Jim, who was my teacher, he was so brilliant at this. He was really able to separate himself from other people's journeys. It's sort of, in the last talk we talked about the difference between sort of creating a bubble around us so that we didn't absorb other people's stuff, and the ability to be like a flow-through tea bag. That when we're really clear about who we are and we're really connected to our own emotions, then we understand that emotions come and go, right? A healthy emotional pattern rises and falls, right? We feel deeply sad, and as long as we go deeply into it, it will pass. We feel grief, and as long as we fully go into it, then it passes. And this is a natural flow of emotions. And it's really important when we're working with other people that when they have emotions, that it flows through us the same, like that nothing gets caught inside of us. And it's almost like when we work as a healer, it can be really dangerous because we can take them on our system. It's almost like we take their story, we internalize the story, we sort it out, and it's almost like we try to process it through our own system to try to find the solution. And this is exhausting, and this is often when we feel too much. And it's a very different way of doing it when we actually listen and trust and just simply listen for guidance, as opposed to taking it into ourselves and being more the flow-through tea bag. But it's a great challenge when we're working like intimately with people in their emotional journey. I have dealt with both siblings as narcissists. One I rarely see, one I'm in her life with strong boundaries. She is great. She has great parts too, and I love her. I feel I need to love her and support her because she's in pain. Yet it throws me off my path sometimes. I realize it's not my responsibility, her journey. How do you let it flow through you without attachment? It's a funny thing, like even like philosophically, to ask ourselves about this idea of attachment to another person's journey. Right? Like, what are we attached to? Like, what are we saying? Are we attached to this person because I love them? Right? So I love them and I care about them and I want them to be okay. But they're hurting. But that's normal. Right? We all have hurt in the past. Like, it's an interesting thing. Sometimes it's like we really have to go inside of ourselves and say, why am I so uncomfortable with them hurting? You know, and it's interesting too, because like our society has this thing about hurting. Like, it's sort of the heavy medication thing. That if I'm hurting, I should take something so I don't hurt anymore. I should take a pharmaceutical. I should have a drink. I should smoke pot. I should take something. I should buy some clothes. I should go gambling. I should have sex. I should do something to stop hurting. Because we don't know how to handle hurting. So it's really, really common to then be really uncomfortable with someone else who's hurting, because we're working really hard to bury the hurt inside of ourselves. And I wonder if it's a really interesting journey for all of us to really explore hurting without any kind of medication. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying go off meds or anything like that. I'm saying philosophically to look at this and ask ourselves, why are we so uncomfortable with pain? Why are we so uncomfortable with hurting? You know, why are we not instead, like, sometimes I swear a lot of the medication we're on is just helping us stay in really painful situations. You know, it's helping us stay in painful relationships or painful jobs or painful whatever. I'm not talking about taking drugs for body pain and things like that. That's not what I'm talking about. But so sometimes I think we have a hard time feeling other people's pain because we don't feel our own. We run from it. So it might just be an interesting journey to kind of look within and say, what do I do with pain? Am I okay with it? Am I okay with, do I believe that there's something to be learned? Is there something I'm supposed to pay attention to? Is there action I'm meant to take? Because when we're okay with our own pain, someone else can really be hurting. And we can sit with them. And we don't take it on. Because we know for some reason it's really important. You know? It's kind of like, you know, sometimes it has to hurt enough to take your hand off the hot burner. Right? Someone standing there convincing you or giving you medication so that you can't feel your hand anymore isn't helpful. I think people think the pain's going to last forever. I think so. But again, I think this comes out of a time when we didn't have a lot of choices, right? You couldn't get divorced. Your family owned you. If you were born into a certain level of society, you had no choice. This was your lot in life. You were controlled by the church or the militia or the family or the clan or whatever. Like, we have a lot of deep ancestral history that if you don't enjoy the family you're living in or where you're living in, this is never going to end. But we don't live in that time now. We're in 2022. We do have choice. And I think that's part of the, we were talking about non-attachment. You know, to not be attached anymore to this false security of the herd or the opinions of other people, or will the clan still approve of me, or will they still feed me? These are old ideas. You know, we have choice. And even the people who are in pain have choice. Everybody has choice. We may not like the choices, or we might be afraid of the choices, or we may have to change in order to do the choices. But we do have choice. People are afraid of pain, non-acceptance. So, and this is the challenge with the pain, is that pain is an important feeling. If you step on something that's sharp, pain makes us pull our foot up. If we touch a hot burner, pain makes us take the hand off the burner. Pain's really important. If I have a broken leg, pain will make me sit on the couch until it's healed, or make me go to a doctor and have it set. Pain's really important. The pain that people are feeling, that we're talking about, isn't that kind of pain. It's again this frontal cortex problem, that we don't let anything go. We just relive things. Or we make stuff up. Like, we'll say things like, I'm in so much pain because my son is living a life I can't approve of. Or I'm in so much pain because I didn't get my way with this thing. Like, it's all made up in our mind. Or I'm in so much pain because my relationship broke up. Well, yeah, okay. We have to grieve for a while. We have to disentangle our hearts from this huge experience and this huge merging with another soul. And that's part of it. But we have to dive into it. We have to dive into it. It's okay, I'm grieving, I'm angry. We go through all the stages of death, of something. The fact that we then still have residual pain, that's our brain holding on to something. I'll never find anyone else. I'll always be alone. I'll always be a loser. I'll never have enough money. It's weird. And we have to be so careful. Like, I don't even sometimes know where those thoughts come from. Because if we can possibly snap ourselves out of them, we realize, whoa, what was I caught in that for? And sometimes, as much as I hate to say it, sometimes people stay in pain to keep you close. It's a huge manipulation tactic. It's not conscious, but they just desperately want someone close. They want someone to take care of them. They want someone to love them. They want someone to care. So they stay in a state of pain, right? Because then our maternal instinct, all gender, will step in and try to care for them. So it's really important for us to stay in our own lane, really listen within, really pray. Am I meant to be here? Am I not meant to be here? Where am I meant to be, right? Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day.